act on me, I guess.
Ani DeFranco singing Your Next Bold Move. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. At today's news conference at the G20 summit in London, President Obama also spoke about the situation in Afghanistan.
We also discussed the progress that was made yesterday at The Hague, where more than 70 nations gathered to discuss our mutual responsibilities to partner with the Afghan people so that we can deny al-Qaeda a safe haven. And in the days ahead, we'll consult further with our NATO allies about training Afghan security forces, increasing our civilian support, and a regional approach that recognizes the connection between the future of Afghanistan and Pakistan.
After the G20 meeting, Obama's heading to Strasbourg, France, and Kiel, Germany, where he will take part in a major NATO summit commemorating the 60th anniversary of the alliance. Afghanistan's expected to be at the top of the agenda, and Obama is expected to ask for NATO's support for his escalation of the war. Obama said he plans to send an extra 17,000 soldiers and 4,000 advisors to Afghanistan. Congressmember Jim McDermott recently traveled to Afghanistan as part of a congressional delegation. He's a Democratic senator from Seattle, joining us now from Washington, D.C. We welcome you to Democracy Now!, Congressman McDermott.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
It's good to have you with us. Well, we hear that there was a secret meeting between the House Democrats and President Obama before he left, the topic being Afghanistan. Is this true?
I was not in the meeting, so I don't know if it occurred or not.
Well, you just came back from Afghanistan. What is your assessment of the Obama administration's policy to expand the war there?
Well, I think it's almost larger than the Obama policy, but I'm very worried about any escalation that we do in Afghanistan. We went roaring into there 9 years ago and dropped bombs all over Tora Tora and did all kinds of things and put on this big effort, and then it didn't work. We didn't get rid of Osama bin Laden, and we didn't get rid of the terrorists, and so we moved on to Iraq and just left it to fester. Now we're coming back 8 years later, having continued to kill civilians and create enormous animosity toward Americans. And the history of the Pashtun people, there are 40 million Pashtuns who live in an area that straddles the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They threw out the British on 2 occasions in the 1800s, and they threw out the Russians a few years ago. And my belief is that we are going into something that we really don't understand.
What is that?
Well, we have some idea that we're going to make it a peaceful, quiet place that it has never been. There's been fighting in that area for over 1,000 years, and the tribal areas are so tumultuous that Pakistan has never tried to exercise any governmental control in those areas. They've just ceded it to the local tribes. And for us to think that we're going to go in there and be more successful than the Pakistan government is, when we don't speak Urdu and we don't speak Pashto and we don't speak Balti and we don't speak all the languages, we don't know the customs, is simply to get us enmeshed in another quagmire similar to what we got into in Vietnam when we didn't understand what we were dealing with. And I think that the issue here, if you read a book called 3 Cups of Tea by Greg Mortensen, he talks about how you get to know the people, how you sit down, how you learn, and he winds up building schools. He's built more than 100 schools for girls in that area. But it requires listening to the natives, not coming in with a fixed idea that as an American, you know what's best for them. And I'm afraid that our leadership is barging in there again, thinking we know what's best for them, and this is how we're going to do it. And every time a drone bombs a wedding party, we make more enemies for ourselves.
Congressman McDermott, you took a trip to Iraq in 2002 before the invasion, which you were criticized for by those who supported the Bush administration. You were opposed to the war in Iraq. So was President Obama. He spoke out in 2002. Why do you think he has taken this different tack with Afghanistan?
Well, I think the President of the United States is always caught in the pressure between what might be good public policy seen from a civilian side and what the military says is a good policy. The President of the United States has the responsibility to protect the American people. That's his first responsibility. And as happened to John Kennedy, they got him in office and they said, hey, look, we got this problem in Cuba. Let's go down there and in an afternoon we can wipe out the Cuban resistance and get rid of this guy Fidel Castro. That led to the Bay of Pigs debacle. And the military answer that Americans tend to favor, that is, if we have strong arms and we have bombers and we have all this kind of stuff, that somehow that will prevail, has proven wrong over and over and over again. And the only way we're going to really solve these situations is with soft power, that is with diplomacy and economic aid. And I think that President Obama is right now listening to those military advisors in ways that I think are, in the long run, not going to be good for the country and not good for his presidency, frankly. I worry about him. I want him to succeed. I want him to be the best president we ever had. But I'm worried that he's listening to the wrong people. He's not listening to enough people who say, take a cup of tea and listen to these people and figure out what needs to be done.
You're not far from the Canadian border when you're back home in Seattle. President Obama's first foreign trip was to Canada. Canada is pulling out their troops from Afghanistan. Then he met with Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister of Britain, in the White House. Many were surprised they didn't hold a joint news conference. They sat there taking a photo op and ended up extending it to more than 20 minutes. It looked like it was sort of flub of the Obama administration, since the British leader had always been treated differently in the past. The Brits are very much the population opposed to war in Afghanistan. Why do you think it is Obama is taking this different tack? I mean, when it comes to the other countries in the world, it seems that the U.S. is once again, as with Iraq, trying to pull other countries along, and they're resisting. They're pulling out.
Well, I think the president, when he came into office, one of the charges and that was constantly railed against him was he's not going to be a good commander-in-chief. He's not going to be strong. He's not going to protect us. He's going to be weak. He's going to capitulate to our enemies. And again, as I said about John Kennedy was under the same kind of criticism as he came into office. And I think the president is responding to that by trying to be a strong leader. And if you listen to his speeches, he keeps talking about protecting the American people, protecting the American people. George Bush, in his attacks on Iraq and on Afghanistan, did not make us safer in the long run. We have two festering wars now in the Middle East, and maybe a third one in Pakistan, if you want to look at it that way. And that kind of advice that your answer is to march out and bomb people and use guns and tanks and all this military hardware is hard for a president not to react to. Otherwise, we'll call him weak and we'll say, well, he gave in and he lost the first war and all that kind of stuff. And a president doesn't want that kind of image. So I think the president is caught in a very tough situation. And I think it's important for him to know there are people like me and many of my friends in Congress who are interested in supporting him in adopting a much more diplomatic approach to what goes on in Afghanistan.
And how much access do you have to President Obama?
Well, at this point, they're sailing one direction, but I think as they go down the road and need votes, they're going to have to listen to people who don't agree with them on the idea of expanding the war. I mean, 17,000 troops and now 4,000 troops, that's mission creep in my view. We'll have everybody that we take out of Iraq in Afghanistan if we're not careful. And we will have not brought the troops home, which I think ought to be our main goal. And we will not have established peacefulness in that area. So I think as things develop, remember the president's only been in office for 60 days, so I'm willing to give him some time. I'm worried, but I'm willing to give him some time to get his feet on the ground and figure out what's going on and actually assess it for himself, because he's very smart and very thoughtful and asks hard questions, and I haven't given up at all on him. I think he's going to be a good president.